Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only Pac-Man here, and I am once again back for the likes of the Maxi Toys videos. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more of Let's Play of Wario Land 4 for the Game Boy Advance. So, last time we have basically managed to able to complete everything in terms of the Emerald Passage by able to not only exploring through two levels which are Mystic Lake as well as the forms of Morrison Jungle, and also we deal with the next boss which is Craterus. So today for this episode is the fact that we're about to be able to move on to the next passage, which by the forms of it though, the next passage we're going to be running to, like I said it earlier, ever since in last Thursday, the next passage we'll hit on to is the Rupee Passage. And as far as I'm aware, I think the majority of those levels, well, I'll get to more in a second, because the first stage in that passage is the Curious Factory. And as far as I'm aware, for this entire passage itself, it's going to be most likely takes place in likely the nature of this particular, or the actual theming of this passage anyway, it's going to be most likely mechanical theme. So because of that though, ranging from the actual Curious Factory and all that stuff, whatever we get into it enjoying later on today, and possibly on Thursday as well. So either way though, we'll get this started. So obviously, to deal with these guys, as you can see, that sometimes you can either just ground pound them, or simply just trying to able to actually just to shoulder bash into them. So in this case though, from the back anyway, because if you try to do it in front of them, then obviously you're going to get hit. So just be very careful. And also we stumbled across another familiar transformation. If you ever played Wario Land 2 and Wario Land 3 before, this appears to be Flat Wario, where once again he can able to actually decide to go through certain areas that normally normal Wario cannot make it through, as well as that he can able to actually decide to glide through certain segments. So in this case though, is the fact that yeah, it's actually a very familiar transformation, but you can only do that by getting crushed and stuff like that. And there's also another level that we'll come across into that in the future, and I somehow messed up my jump. So yeah, I was thoughts about that, because there was actually something that's usually on the something is usually over there, but we need to able to actually just to become Flat Wario in order to able to actually just make our way to that specific section. So yeah, that's what I thought so anyway. So anyways, let's go ahead and do this carefully now. And there we go, we've now finally made it. And of course we need to do that again on here and here. So in this case though, we can able to just make it for that little hole there. And in order to restore yourselves is the fact that you have to able to find the regenerator machine until you're able to actually just go back to its normal self. So yeah, that pretty much summarizes as such. So today's day is of course the 15th of February today, in this case in 2022 today. So it looks like about the fact that, well, I forgot to mention about that, ever since during the course of The Legend of Zelda A Link to the Past playthrough, as well as the forms of Wario Land 4 Let's Play as well, that, actually I'll get to more on that in a second, because first of all, tomorrow, for those of you able to actually following from my channel for a very long time, that during tomorrow, which is by of course, the 16th of February, that means about the fact the matter is though, is that the Maxi Toys YouTube channel will be eventually become 11 years old. So yeah, that seems very exciting for those of you able to actually be very curious to see what that's going to be representing with. So of course, that one thing I should probably mention about this is the fact that, relatively speaking, it's just the fact of the matter is that I don't know if we can able to actually plan out for something for this year though, because obviously we've already gone through several anniversaries of our channel, at least back in the forms of well, technically we no longer have the 3-year anniversary in 2014, because that particular video is like, kind of sucks honestly, because of the forms of not only do we able to actually stumble across the forms of the bad top 10 montage of our videos themselves, but also that we actually stumbled across the forms of the actual copyright strike in terms of utilizing the pop music. So, but we're not going to mention that specific song though, because obviously that times went on and things gets a little bit more better for the sake of our channel at this rate. So, because after all, thanks to the forms of the capture card that we still have and all that jazz. So, And yeah, the Curious Factory has a lot of like mechanical contraptions, such as for instance with the rotating platform, as well as conveyor belts, as well as the smashed little contraption thing right here. So we pretty much expected by that point. So yeah, that pretty much summarizes such for the sake of time. So I suppose another thing I should probably explain about this as well, I think. That I was expecting if I was trying to able to mention more the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympics results so far, but I think I should probably save that conversation until whenever I go back onto The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, because, well, you probably already know what I mean, because obviously that every now and then on certain parts for that game is gonna get slightly bit longer, but as a result though, I can cope with the forms of the length. So either way though, let's just go ahead and actually we can probably just able to let the actual Smash Compactor thing try to able to bump that particular rock someplace else, and we should able to time our darn this. I suppose we should probably just keep trying anyway, because, well, again, you can't pick things up where while the actual object was in water, so yeah, we only have like thankfully we do have a couple of tries to do this, because obviously though that with the amount of emphasis on trial and error sometimes, that's surely that's usually the case for the sake of trial and error sometimes. So anyway, let's get into the forms of another discussion for this point today, even though it's better late than never I suppose, that recently that the Nintendo Switch has been once again doing so well. Up to this point for this particular update for sales records comes from the forms of by the end of 2021, in this case the final day of that year, from the likes of, well, December 31st in 2021. So far that the Nintendo Switch has now been sold for about, let's just say 103 points, actually I think I've lost count now, because I know it has been a couple of days since I actually last mentioned about the forms of how many sales records so far for the sake of Nintendo Switch is doing. Actually, I think I've still got it right here actually. So the Nintendo Switch has now been sold for about 103.54 million units sold, which not only does it manage to able to now get on to the top 5 in terms of the best-selling consoles ever, but also, so far, in terms of the console department, the home console-based systems, that the Nintendo Switch is now becoming the #1 best-selling home console Nintendo console. So yeah, it's actually pretty awesome actually, especially noticeable that every now and then, that's not only that, but also the Nintendo Switch is almost barely trying to catch up to the PS4 sales, which is by the forms of likely at this point that the PS4 was actually on to 116.6 million units sold. So it is quite close, potentially speaking, whilst usually relatively speaking that the PS4 is still continuing support, even after almost like 9 years, ever since in 2013, but we'll see what happens there. And also, we've actually stumbled across another familiar transformation, as you can see on screen. We have the Fire Wario, or Burning Wario. And basically, it's acted out very differently from the likes of both Wario Land 2 and Wario Land 3. Because normally in the past two games, basically though is the fact that in order to able to become Burning Wario from those two games, basically though is the fact that you always have to rely on the forms of how the fact that you always have to keep an eye on with the forms of that flashy sprite work, until you're able to actually realize that you will able to become Burning Fire Wario, until you're able to actually burn it into specific blocks, ranging from the forms of well, just fire blocks in general. Whilst in here, along with the forms of Wario Land the Shake Dimension, aka Wario Land Shake It, basically in order to become Burning Wario this time around though, is the fact that you're gonna have to bump into walls for about 4 times. And then if you do it 4 times, basically though, I think, oh wait, actually you will able to actually bump into any walls within 3 times. That way you become Burning Wario instantly. So because of that though, at least you can able to actually just to able to still break the fire blocks until you're able to... Oh, what the heck? Alright, that was a bit weird, but I somehow accidentally managed to activate the timer, but that's okay, because we stumbled across the actual key item from the likes of after trying to jumping through those conveyor belts, and now we've actually got that. So now we need to make our way towards the very end, but either way though, we're just able to, you know, not to be too slow or anything, so either way though, we can able to expect this much, so alright, let's get this guy out of the way. And we've only got one more piece of the stone left until we're able to insert one of our stones into one of the boss door that we can able to hopefully try to eventually go through until later on anyway though. So I have no idea what's the point of able to actually just to go out there to begin with. But regardless of everything else though, because that particular rock block just managed to able to block the progression up there, because, well, obviously we need to make our way back to the portal itself. So anyway, in addition to where, you know, Nintendo Switch has now been sold for about, you know, for the sales records has now reached up to like 100+ million units, which is specifically, like I said, 103.54 million units sold. But also in terms of software games are concerned, well, as far as I'm aware, first of all, let's tackle for the forms have been, although before I mentioned about the actual game's copies sold wise, but also did manage to surpass not only the Nintendo Wii, but also the PlayStation 1. So because of that though, yeah, the Nintendo Switch is now on to the top 5 best selling consoles ever. So usually relatively speaking, because compared to the Nintendo Wii, only sold for about 101.63 million units sold. And as far as PlayStation 1 is concerned, they basically got 102.49 million units sold. So if eventually we decide able to do the Nintendo Switch game update collection video at some point, not this year though, because obviously Nintendo Switch is still continuing for that point. So because of that though, we'll probably have to wait for it until, you know, the actual Switch lifespan is actually going to be on, possibly in 2024 if possible, but we have no idea yet because, you know, we're still in 2022 though, so anyways, let's get into that portal, and we should able to actually just to not only, you know, progress to the next level, but also we able to actually got ourselves our CD, so, but we'll show off the CD and during at some point, later on throughout the Let's Play, so, but not now anyway though, because we'll just have to save it up for later, so. Alright, so now we've actually unlocked the door, which pretty much leads us to the next level, so I wonder what the next levels are going to be. I know it's still going to be likely a huge emphasis on mechanical stuff, so the Toxic Landfill, so this will be interesting. So anyway, in terms of the forms of the game's sales numbers for the sake of certain titles, first of all, let's get into the forms of the top 10 for the sake of the massive update. So for instance, let's just say number 1 is still Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, so to be expected by this point, and for that game has now got up to 43.35 million copies sold. So yeah, that's actually super impressive. Even though if we able to actually imagine if we try to combine the Switch version of the game and as well as the Wii U version of the game, that would be more accurately like 50 million copies sold if you try to combine those two versions combined. But somehow it's going to be individual sales records, so at least it's like something like hot cakes for the sake of the forms of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe still, which I'm guessing because of the improvement battle mode and stuff like that still doesn't receive DLC yet, which is kind of a shame. But regardless of everything else though, the game is still doing so well. And speaking of doing so well still, is the forms of Animal Crossing New Horizons, thanks to the forms of the Happy Home Paradise is now a thing for the sake of the DLC department, and also some other like quality of life improvements thanks to certain patches and stuff like that. And the third best selling game at the moment is well, specifically on the Switch, and that is Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, which to be expected, because that was still is without doubt my favorite Smash Bros. Game now, and 4th place goes to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and number 5th goes to Pokemon Sword and Shield, number 6 goes to Super Mario Odyssey, and 7th place goes to Super Mario Party, which is kind of interesting about the fact that that game technically still do it so well, despite the fact that Mario Party Superstars is actually going to be the newest game in the lineup, which I think I'll talk more about that game in a second. So yeah, for let's get to the forms of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate first, or should I say, Animal Crossing New Horizons. Animal Crossing New Horizons is now on to 37.62 million copies sold. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is now up to 27.14 million copies sold. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is on 25.80 million copies sold. And Pokemon Sword and Shield is now on to 23.90 million copies sold. Super Mario Odyssey is on 23.02. Is on, well, usually 23.02 million copies sold. Sorry for a little bit of a tongue twisting in the end, folks, so I do apologize for that. So yeah, for Super Mario Party was actually on 17.39 million copies sold, which is kind of impressive, despite the fact that with the actual lack of interesting boards, but aside from that, the game is still doing so well. And for Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee is going to be on 14.33 million copies sold. And the newest one in the lineup, and that was on the 9th spot, which appears to be Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, which is now on to 13.97 million copies sold. So yeah, it looks like that new Super Mario Bros. U is now going to be below that. So in this case, speaking of that though, the 10th spot is actually Ring Fit Adventure, which is now going to be on 13.53 million copies sold, because obviously with exercise they need to do for the sake of the forms of likely before it gets to lockdown again, which is kind of a good thing, because if you don't do any exercises at all, then you're probably not going to be able to lose weight. So anyway, for the 11th spot now is going to be New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, and somehow they've managed able to got 12.72 million copies sold. And it looks like there's going to be a massive changes now for the sake of the forms of Splatoon 2. So I think Splatoon 2 is now going to be on the 12th spot, which is now going to be on 12.68 million copies sold. God knows, until when Splatoon 3 is going to come out, it will sell like hotcakes or something like that, but we're not exactly 100% sure, because the problem is though, that Pokemon game is actually doing really well with in terms of sales numbers. I can imagine about the fact of how much copies sold they managed able to utilize that for the sake of Pokemon Legends Arceus, but maybe we'll find out during at some point, maybe at some point on May, because of the forms of the actual monthly basis. So, but I digress. And for number 13 goes to Luigi's Mansion 3, which is now on to 11.04 million copies sold, so it's doing quite well. And number 14 goes to Super Mario 3D All-Stars, despite the fact that the sales numbers does not change at all, because it involves the discontinuation for new sealed copies anyway. So because of that, that game is still sold for about 9.01 million copies sold. So at least it's pretty good. And there's also nothing changes from here. Huge changes on the other hand though, and as the forms of number 15th spot is now on to Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury, and that particular port to the Wii U game is now sold for about 8.85 million copies sold. So it looks like it's doing super well compared to the forms of how it does it on the Wii U version. So yeah, at least it's doing so well for that front. Especially noticeable they managed to feature online features and stuff like that, which is impressive. And number 16 goes to Monster Hunter Rise. It's on 7.70 million copies sold. So yeah, that's actually pretty good for the Monster Hunter game. And nothing different from the likes of Super Mario Maker 2, sadly, even though it's dipped down as in the 17th placement. So in this case, that game is now, well, usually still sold for about 7.15 million copies sold so far still. And 18th still goes to The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, even though it still got 5.49 million copies sold, as in by the end of last year in March. So yeah, that's nothing different from there. New to the lineup, on the other hand though, and that is the forms of Mario Party Superstars. And for that game, sales records placement-wise, at the moment, is on 19th place. Because it's pretty obvious, because that game came out in October last year, so they need able to get that out of the way with the earliest selling records as far as I'm usually concerned. And that game is now sold for about 5.43 million copies sold. So it's doing so well. So far so good. Especially noticeable, it's doing a lot better than the forms of how it does it on the 3DS counterpart, which is obviously Mario Party the Top 100, because, well, that game was on the 3DS though, so they didn't do so well on the Top 100. But at least in Mario Party Superstars, it's doing so well. But I don't know which specific placement in terms of the forms of the rankings of the best-selling games in terms of the entirety of the Mario Party games so far. But I'll probably do a massive research on it at some point. So yeah, it's doing pretty well for Mario Party Superstars. So yeah, that's that. Number 20 goes to Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, now on to 4 million copies sold, so this is doing quite well, especially thanks to the DLC is now being completed and stuff. And The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD is on the 21st position, and that game is now sold for about 3.85 million copies sold. So yeah, that's actually it's doing so well. And nothing different from Among Us, still on to 3.20 million copies sold, I think anyway. That's usually that game is now on to 22nd place. And for 1-2 Switch, nothing different, just still 3.80 million copies sold, but it's now on to the 23rd spot. And Clubhouse Games 51 Worldwide Classics is nothing different for its sales records, still on to 3.14 million copies sold, and that particular game is now on 24th place. And Paper Mario The Origami King, still no differences whatsoever for the sales records, still sold for about 3.12 million copies sold, as in by the end of March last year. So because of that though, and that game is now in 25th place. And 26th place goes to Mario Tennis Aces, nothing different for the sales records, still sell for about 3.06 million copies sold still. And as far as the forms of other games I can top it off, aside from the forms of that, there's also Metroid Dread. That is, so far, currently, that game is now on 31st place at the moment, and that game sold for about 2.74 million copies sold so far. Doing pretty well, all things considered. And also, what else is there? I totally forgot. Oh, there's also Big Brain Academy, Brain vs. Brain is on 46th place position at the moment, and that game is sold for about 1.28 million copies sold so far. I'll promise I'll get into more details about the list at some point, maybe the next day, which is specifically on Thursday, because at this point in time, I think I'm running out of time, because as you can tell, that I've managed to complete the Toxic Landfill, so not bad for a level, despite the fact that the CD I just managed to found is actually one of the difficult CDs that you might able to actually just try to find, and it's also easy to miss if you have a first time playing through it. So anyway, so that being said though, we'll go ahead and end things off here, so join me next time on Let's Play of Wario Land 4 for the Game Boy Advance. That is the fact that we'll continue things on in the Rupee Passage by going to explore 40 Below Fridge. Oh jeez, that particular place is going to be freezing cold by that point, but we'll get into that. So I'll see you guys on Thursday. Later fellas.